Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Wednesday. Autumn was Thor's favorite season. The world changed around him in an amazing cornucopia of scents. The color of the leaves meant nothing to him, but the aromas did. Fungi bloomed as quadrillions of spores feasted on decaying matter. So much of the woods around his house smelled like pine and cold, peaty earth. But more than scents, the sounds of the woods played a happy score. Acorns fell with the softness of rain in the forest. In other places, ripe walnuts dropped with a clatter. He followed his ears to these sounds and enjoyed chewing on the nice seasonal alternative to kibble. But the most exciting sound of all? Squirrel! His ears perked up when he heard the dead leaves crunch as the rodent foraged for acorns. He turned and sped toward it. Thor smelled it before he saw it. The scent reminded him of the den room his two-legged packmates used to do their business. The eldest pup, or alpha female, marred their natural scent with a stinging putridness when they cleaned the giant water bowl. A gray creature lumbered across his path. It was about the size of the smaller pup, and it also walked on two legs. He barked at it in the hope it would be his new friend. The creature responded by emitting a squeal that would be almost too high for his family to hear, but the intent came across loud and clear to Thor. He backed away when something larger charged through the trees. An adult version of the creature burst through the brush, emitting a deeper squeal that bordered on a growl. Despite it being foreign to him, he knew it presented a threat. His fur went up, and he took an aggressive stance while he attempted to retreat. The smaller one retreated. The larger creature swiped at him, but Thor jumped out of the way. The creature issued another high-pitched bellow from a gaping circular maw. The scent of the water bowl cleaner was more pungent, and it stung the millions of olfactory nerves in his snout. He whimpered in pain before he caught the creature's follow-up. It was a glancing blow, one that traced along the line of Thor's spine to reveal pink musculature and a long, bloody gash. He howled in pain as the adrenaline kicked in. He contorted himself, ignoring the pain, and took off through the woods in a desperate race to get back to his pack's den. The creature uttered a clicking noise, and its child hurried to its side, slithered up its back, and perched there. She sniffed the air of the alien world. Her son needed sustenance. They, along with the rest of their swarm, had only been on the planet for less than a rotation, and food proved elusive. It was a strange world full of exotic prey, fear, sickness, and all the attendant emotional energies. Its kind preyed on the weak, culling them from nature. It avoided the healthy and strong, engaging them only when necessary for defense. The last animal threatening its child had been healthy and strong. After the fight, less so. It considered pursuing it now that it was injured. Instinct held it back. The animal could be returning to a group, and the creature wouldn't be able to fend off a swarm of those things. Besides, it sensed an easier meal close by. Friday. I love the country, especially during fall. 90 minutes ago, I fled the city. I spent the first half an hour caught in a miasma of traffic as commuters jostled to get home. Unlike the zombie horde, I made an escape from the concrete jungle where one marks the passage of seasons more by temperature and less by the panoply of nature's colors. St. Louis, and my destination, is in the hilly parts of Missouri. The foothills of the Ozark Mountains camouflage the fact that I live in a plains state. About 30 miles southwest on I-44, I'm greeted by hills painted in vibrant reds and yellows. Just over an hour into my journey, I turned off the highway. Shortly after that, down a gravel road, over railroad tracks, and down into a tree-lined one-lane thoroughfare. I am invisible to the handful of those that commute or play this far from civilization. This is when the transformation happens. Surrounded by nature, I am no longer a drone, but a human being. I roll down the windows. It recently rained, and a hint of its musky, earthy fragrance lingers like my wife's perfume whenever she leaves the house. Gravel crunches under the F-150's tires as leaves fall around me like giant earth-toned snowflakes. In the back of the extended cab, I hear claws as Snaggletooth, my three-legged mutt, struggles to find purchase to enjoy the breeze in his fur, and the country smells far keener than I ever could. I turned onto my driveway. It's about a quarter of a mile long and leads straight to a garage that started out as a one-car brick affair when my grandfather built it with the old house in the 50s. Later, they expanded by adding a two-car garage. When my parents inherited it and the 250 acres it sat on, my mother next made my dad build a 6-foot privacy fence. He started on one side of the garage, and when he finished, an acre around the old house had been enveloped. The house that once stood here burned down when I was 10. My little brother Glenn and I finished growing up in the one built in its place. My wife and I fixed it up about 5 years ago when my parents sold us a 50-acre plot after retiring from ranching. They sold the other 200 acres to Glenn, who never wanted to leave the tiny village of St. Cloud, and he took over the family ranching business. I park the truck and take a moment to enjoy the exhibition nature is putting on for me. Blazing reds mixed with purplish maroons and punctuated by a burst of gold. The sun adds to the show. Its slanted rays now give everything a golden glow. I inhale deeply as a cool wind tugs at my t-shirt, carrying the promise of another rain. I never paid attention to this until my bill-paying job sent me to the desert for 6 months. After 180 days of nothing but sun-bleached sand and brown buildings, I came home in August and noticed for the first time just how many shades of green the leaves were. That fall, the colors popped for me, and I haven't taken the Midwest's natural beauty for granted since. Come on, Snaggle, let's get inside. Hauling a gym bag and rifle case in one hand, I press the garage door button and hear the ancient machine creak to life as the heavy aluminum door lowers. My tripod dog races into the yard looking for a tree after the long drive. Relieved, he begins his ritualistic inspection of his surroundings. My eyes follow him as he deftly hobbles across the lawn. My gaze pauses on the empty space where I started building a swing set. It was going to be a nice one, complete with a tree house, tiny rock wall, and curvy slide. I stopped building when we got the cancer diagnosis. I burned it to the ground after the funeral. The wound is raw, the scab recently pulled off. Petra started talking about adoption. Deep down, I don't think either one of us wants to risk cursing another child with whatever big C gene we're carrying. She also wants to sell the house and land to Glenn and build a dream home somewhere else. In concession, she offered to build here in St. Cloud, but I know she wants to build somewhere far away from the memories that haunt this place. Writing is the overt reason I'm here. To say goodbye to my childhood home is another. Petra is strong. She is my hero. The light that keeps the darkest recesses of my mind from overwhelming me again. This place has always been an anchor for me, a touchstone of happy, uncomplicated times in my life. But it's been tainted for both of us now. I have to be strong for her. Pull anchor and move on. I frown as I step inside, greeted by the stale stench of uncirculated air with a hint of mildew. We forgot to keep the fans on. With the temperate season, the AC hasn't kicked on much, if at all, since our last visit a month ago. I head deeper inside, as it's a ranch-style home with a straight line from the side door by the garage to my bedroom. In fact, I can see into the walk-in closet from where I stand. Behind me, I hear the click-clack of dog claws on the wood floor as Snaggle rushes in, carrying a faint odor of ammonia. Well, at least you smell clean, buddy. Did you roll in some Windex? I drop the gym bag and rifle case onto the bed. Snaggle remains close. Unusually close. Did King Nigel hiss at you again? An 8-foot snake lives under our porch. We have a treaty of sorts. If he leaves us alone, he can eat all the rodents and other pests he wants. The treaty does allow him to hiss at the dogs if they get too close. The rain beat a steady tattoo on the metal roof as I sipped a scotch on the rocks, protected from the downpour by a covered patio running the length of the front of the house. From time to time, a gust of wind causes the rain to sheet. Angry dark clouds force an early darkness to fall. Snaggle lies at my feet, his head and ears perking up from time to time when he thinks he hears something. Nature always provides great ambiance for plotting a novel. My next will be about a murdered bully haunting the small town that made a pact to kill him and got away with it. It was Petra's idea that I come down without her and take one of the dogs. She knew I needed some time and space to process the topic of adoption and selling this place before we discussed it again. Just me and my laptop with, hopefully, a little target practice before deer season. A weekend of no interruptions. I hadn't even told Glenn. The landline rings on cue. Too good to be true, I mutter as I step inside and answer without looking at the caller ID. Only 3 people possess this number. Hey, little brother. Snaggle follows, not wandering more than a couple of feet from me. What's up, big brother? Comes Glenn's drawling voice. He always fit in better in St. Cloud. Didn't know you was coming down till I saw your truck drive past the field this afternoon. I knew I should have taken the back way to the house. Well, I came down to... Yeah, I know. Writer's got a right. His voice carries a dismissive quality I know so well. But listen, let's get together tomorrow. His tone shifts into Bigfoot hunter mode. I was planning on checking all the trail cams. Look, I didn't come down here to go chasing Bigfoot. It's not Bigfoot. Or aliens. A pause. I'm sure we got something this time. Sarah and me were on a front porch the other night and we saw a shooting star, only it didn't disappear. It hit the earth over your direction toward the Pea Ridge mine. I shake my head. Yes, because aliens want to mine an exhausted iron mine. Not iron, rare earth elements. You know they're talking about reopening it. They even did a survey. If I say okay, can I hang up? Sure, and get back to your writing, or if I know you, watching the storm and sipping on some scotch. Fine. I crack a smile. He's a goof, but he's my goof. I'll see you tomorrow. Later. I spend the rest of the night researching Ken McElroy, the bully of Skidmore, Missouri. Murdered in 1981, the killer got away because the entire town kept silent. Everyone had an alibi for a shooting with 46 witnesses that happened in broad daylight. Much like his browser history, a writer's dreams are often equally fucked up. When I go to sleep, I dream of Ken chasing me and Glenn through the woods with an M1 Garand rifle. I turn and look back only to see it isn't Ken anymore. It's Bigfoot, and he's holding an anal probe. I wake up before he can catch me. As the dream fades, I realize I can't remember if he caught Glenn. Snaggle is scratching at the door. I told you to go earlier. I get out of bed to let him outside. The storm has passed, but it's too cloudy for the moon to light up the yard. He steps onto the small concrete porch outside the side door and sniffs at the air. Come on, hurry up. Typically, I'd leave him, but he's been clingy tonight, so I don't want him howling outside my window until I let him in. He looks over his back at me as he starts to piss on the wood railing. I shake my head. I want to be mad, but it's hard to be angry at a 3-legged dog lifting a phantom leg. He finishes and retreats into the house. As I follow, I catch a whiff of ammonia. I consider investigating, but Snaggle lets out a whimper. It's too late. I yawn and follow him inside. I crawl under the covers and just start to drift when I heard a thud on the roof of the other side of the house. Immediately I'm awake, and so is Snaggle. By the blue nightlight in the master bath, I can see one lip curled into a silent snarl. He's no longer throwing shade, but looking a little scared. Both of us are wondering if we heard what we thought we heard. The momentary silence is shattered by a frantic skrit, 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 skrit noise coming from the roof. It grows louder as it nears this side of the house. It echoes in the attic crawl space. That's a damn big squirrel. Snaggle lets out a low, barely audible growl in agreement as the scurrying sound crests the center of the roof and begins a descent down the other side, right over the bedroom. I think to myself that I have time to get up and head to the window to see what it is. I will my body to move, but it will not obey. It's probably just a raccoon. Snaggle throws some more shade as we hear it jump from the roof and land with a dull thump on the ground. It's gone, right? Nothing to worry about. Let's go back to sleep, I say as I lie down and roll over. I close my eyes, trying to will myself asleep, but I hear the splintering of wood as something plows through the privacy fence. I'm out of bed in a flash, pulling my rifle from its case, a semi-auto clone of the AK-47. I quickly insert a 5-round hunting mag. I consider grabbing a flashlight and investigating, but I'm too spooked. I rationalize not going outside by convincing myself that it ran away when it crashed through the fence. I crack a window and listen to the sound of nothing. No birds, no insects. Even the wind remains still. I sit in the dark for about 15 minutes before nature comes out from hiding. Crickets and frogs resume their nocturnal serenade. I put the rifle in condition 3, magazine inserted, no round in the chamber, and safety on. I lay it next to me in bed, and after about an hour, I'm able to fall into a light slumber. Saturday. Looks like a damn bear, bro, Glenn whistles. Maybe the seaman that got a hold of Thor. I wince at the memory of the wound on Glenn's black lab after getting swiped at by a brown bear. The dog survived, but had been touch and go. Maybe it didn't sound so heavy on my roof. Maybe you were too scared? I mean, look at that roof. For the 100th time, we look at my metal roof. The paint is scraped off in long, jagged lines. Whatever did this, its claws had torn through the sheet metal. The entire roof would need replacing. How would I explain this to the insurance? I shrug. I can't do anything about the roof, but I can fix the fence. Mind running to Lowe's with me? Sure. You going back tomorrow? Glenn's voice is louder than the drill he's using to screw in one side of a 16-foot 2x4 while I check level. From a young age, we worked the ranch together. Even as adults, when we work together, we fall into a comfortable, efficient rhythm. Nah, Petra gave me a weekend pass. I'll go home Monday. Must be nice working for a government, getting all these days off no one else does. He gets just a smile. What do you think did this? I shake my head. No idea. Well, if you ask me, I think something escaped from that UFO we saw go down. Like what? I indulge his flights of fancy. We're both storytellers at heart, me with writing and him with the gift of gab. I've got some theories. First, since they were on their way to a mine, could be a slave revolt that took down their masters and caused it to crash. We move to the middle runner. Not likely. If they're advanced enough to cross light years of space, I doubt they're relying on manual labor to mine ore. He looks at me with an irksome glare. I swear the man invented side-eye. True. Maybe just mechanical failure. I mean, UFOs are machines, right? You're the expert. I sport a shit-eating grin as I level the 2x4. But I guess an alien civilization that can travel vast distances for long periods is way older than ours, and mechanical reliability would be one of the first things they master. I'm pulling it out of my ass now. Gotta have an answer for everything, don't you? We're mounting the final 2x4. Well, maybe an alien dog of war got loose and is on the prowl? He shakes his head. Now you're just making fun of me. Next, you'll tell me they're predators that escaped while being shipped to an intergalactic zoo. Now who has an answer for everything? He shakes his head again as he picks up a dog-eared picket and holds it in place as I check for plumb. Okay, smartass, then why the clean bathroom smell? He's got me on the lingering smell of ammonia. Glenn's cracked open a bud while I've poured myself 2 fingers of scotch. I don't like it. I want to know what's out there. We're sitting on my back patio. I'm relaxing while he stands and surveys the field we played in as children. We could go check the game cameras. It's getting dark. In the morning? Sounds good to me. Listen, I know you want to have quiet and right, but just in case this is the same thing as got Thor, do you want to come over? Sarah's making a fried chicken. Sounds tasty, but I planned on just being alone. He looks at his shoes as an avoidance technique. After playing Alien Theorists, I told him about Petra's desire to buy land elsewhere. We hadn't talked much since I told him I intended to put my wife first on this. We'll do it. When I texted Sarah, she told me she knew. The girl's been talking on Facebook. Either swap 50 acres for 50 acres, or if you're sure you want to pull stakes completely, we'll buy it outright. Keep it in the family. I'll always carve out a plot if you decide to come back home. I look out at the field where Glenn and I would pretend to be Luke and Vader or Batman and Joker. Then I look at the bare patch of ground where not even grass has started to grow back. There are bad memories here too, and Petra doesn't have as many good ones to outweigh them. Yeah, Glenn, I think I'm sure. I read somewhere marriages rarely survive the death of a child. Petra's all I got. I'm gonna fight tooth and toenail not to lose her too. Saturday night. The creature approached the source of so much anxiety and despair. Its child was left somewhere safe while she explored the alien world and foraged for food. The prey bled so much negative energy that her stomach responded with hunger pangs. This resulted in complacency. Prey this far gone did not put up too much of a fight. I fight the urge to drink myself into oblivion. Snaggle and I lounge on the front porch. Worried the bear may come back, I lean my rifle against the doorframe. I sit with my laptop, the screen's light fighting against the October night and the blinking of the cursor mocking my writer's block. Once more the phone disturbs my solitude. Petra's voice is soft on the distant end. After we exchange the obligatory pleasantries, she simply says, "Thank you." I'm silent, thinking to myself, fucking Sarah, fucking Facebook. Don't be mad at Sarah. She thought we had already talked about it. Even 100 miles apart, she can read my mind. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it? No, not really. No, I think to myself. However, my lips respond with, sure. A fresh start is good for both of us. I know what you're about to say. I idealize this house, this land, but when I get down here, I get sullen. It's not a healthy place for either of us. Her silence reflects the unintentional harshness of my words. Listen, I'm sorry. I break the silence. It's just been a day. Glenn and me had to fix the fence. I just spent the last hour talking with an adjuster about the roof. They'll get someone out here Tuesday since Monday is Columbus Day. I've called Alex and he's not happy about me taking leave on such short notice, but he gets it. Do you want me to let you go? No, not really. I actually wish you were here. Yeah, I was in the middle of a paragraph when you called. Okay, I love you. I know. Nice, Han. Cool. Real cool. I hang up. Well, just me and you, buddy, I say to Snaggle, who gets up to scratch at the door. Fine, I could use some me time. I hear it as I rise, the sound of someone creeping along the fence line. I scan the top of the dog-eared pickets. It's a still night. Too still except for an odd bunch of rustling leaves on a tree about 25 yards away. Hey, who's there? It stops. Snaggle barks. I turn and look at him. He's barking at me from inside the doorway. His hackles are up. I reach for my rifle, thumb the safety off, and charge the bolt to chamber around. The rustling leaves stop. Get the hell out of here! Nothing. I've got a gun! It's a cloudless night and the clearing behind my house is bathed in moonlight. I fire around hoping to scare whatever threat or nuisance is hiding there. If it cries out in fear, I don't hear it. Without ear protection, I become momentarily deaf in my right ear and can barely hear out of the other. What I do hear sounds like something on two legs running away. Great, some punk kid or meth head. I put the rifle's safety on and head back inside with my laptop. I didn't need the fresh air anyway. The creature did not run too far. Confused, she stopped to catch her breath. The prey signaled end-of-life emotions, yet as she closed in to seize upon it, it bellowed with the sound of thunder and created lightning. The prey she normally fed upon would welcome the next stage in the circle of life and would not fight the inevitable. I secure the house. Deadbolts are thrown and locks set. Feeling a little exposed, I close the blinds and blackout curtains. I'm not Stephen King, nor will I ever be, but I do have some fans. While I appreciate them, sometimes they can be intrusive. I put some water on for some sleepy time tea. If that doesn't calm me down, I'll have sleepy time scotch. I put the laptop away. Writing an impossibility tonight. I try reading about a murder bot, but there's too much going on for anything to hold my attention. I need something. Fuck it. I want to do it. Before Petra entered my life, it helped me deal with the darkness. I used to do it with cigarettes. I don't smoke, but I'd buy a pack specifically for this. Maybe I can get a similar effect with a candle. I dig one out, place it on the dinner table, light it, and start playing Blue October's Hate Me on my phone. Closing my eyes, I hold my hand above the flame, just far enough that I feel its heat on my palm. I know the first stanza is about pushing a girlfriend away, but Furstenfeld's words remind me of my own different loss. My hand lowers on its own, the cleansing fire making my hand sweat as the sharp tingling of burning nerves registers. I thought I had won this war against myself, that Petra had been my peacemaker. But here I am, once again on the battlefield. I start to feel the first layers of my skin burn and peel away. Tap, tap, tappity, tap. The sound pulls me out of my self-pity. It sounds like a bird hitting the window above my kitchen sink. I extinguish the candle and curse myself. Petra wouldn't be happy. She knows what these scars mean, and I promised her never again after the last time she caught me. Tappity, tap, tap, tappity. The bird bangs in a persistent rhythm. It annoys the piss out of me. I head to the master bath to shoot some NyQuil just to put me out. I do all the before bed things one does in their bathroom and shuffle to bed. Snaggle walks in and curls up near the closet door, eyeing me with concern. Tap, tap, tappity, tap. Seriously? The fuck? I mutter at the bird that had somehow followed me into the bedroom. I ball my hand into a fist and hit the wall next to the window to shoo the little bird from my windowsill. The NyQuil begins to take effect. As it does, I swear I can still hear dull thumps in the same rhythm as the tapping. I try to fight the drug-induced sleep coming fast, but resistance to oblivion proves futile. The creature became perplexed by the strange den her prey inhabited. Harder than soil, but softer than rock. It sensed its prey, knew it to be close by the emotional energy it radiated. She knew where in its shelter it would move to and followed, testing it for an entry point. She sensed another presence, but one not ready to be consumed. That would be a challenge. Besides, the larger prey seemed settled and gave off less energy. Not knowing if it was playing a trick, she tested the alien den one more time before pursuing other smaller prey nearby to take to her child. Sunday. I decide not to tell Glenn what happened last night. I don't want to fuel his appetite for conspiracy theories. We pull up to the tree with the first game cam we put out. He is the first one out of my side-by-side ATV. I open my laptop as he brings me the camera's SD card. It's filled with pictures of several does, a couple of spiked bucks, and a truly magnificent 10-pointer. Look at the date. Nothing since Tuesday. That's the night Sarah and me saw the UFO crash. I scroll through the pics on my laptop, looking at the timestamps. For at least a month, deer used the path with consistent regularity, passing by the camera at about the same time each day. But for the last 4 days, nothing. Let's get to the camera over by the stream. That's the camera it would have passed by last night. It's our best shot for clues. Glenn hops into the passenger seat of the ATV. I take the wheel and go roaring through a rough trail through the trees at 20 miles per hour. My brother holds onto our rifles as we bounce along down the trail, impish grins on our faces. I turn a corner and hit the brakes too late as we run into a pile of dried gray fur and white bones. It smells like vomit. No, we smell like vomit. What the fuck? Glenn cries in disgust. We're covered with fetid fur. I put the ATV in park and we dismount. Gray fur wafts through the air. He picks up a bone and examines it. Ever see anything like this? No, these are deer bones. Looks like just the back half. Yeah, but the fur. It's a dark gray, don't you think? It's as if he read my mind, and I nod. Owls eat their prey whole and then regurgitate the indigestible bits of fur and bone. Yep, but what the hell kind of owl is big enough to make this big of a pellet? And there's the ammonia scent again. Yeah, I smell it too. Should we look for tracks or get to the next camera? You really want to be out here any longer than we have to? Even with your AK and Petra's lever action you borrowed me? He holds up the 44 mag Henry rifle to make his point. Something that size. Not sure I want to mess with it. I get in the driver's seat, silently conceding his point. With a careful sense of urgency, I drive us to the next camera. Fuck me! Majestic! My passenger shrieks as we approach the tree the next camera had been strapped to. In front of it lay the other half of the deer in the pellet. Everything past the rib cage is gone. The front half seems like a hollow shell of the deer, as if a predator had sucked out all the organs. The carcass reminds me of a business trip to Shreveport. A restaurant there served crawdads, and the deer's remains resemble the leftover husks. Glenn hops out before I can come to a complete stop and runs to the buck. Dreams of having it stuffed and mounted on his wall after deer season now dashed. He lifts it by the antlers, and I can see the dead white eyes staring into nothingness. A discolored tongue hangs from its mouth. The familiar stench of ammonia returns. Fuck you! Glenn screams to the absent creature that savaged the animal. I witnessed him this upset over a dead animal once before. We had found a doe killed by a poacher. The asshat cut out the backstrap and left the rest to rot. I tried reassuring him that it would feed the scavengers, so it wasn't too wasteful. Glenn would have none of it then, and he won't hear it now, so I remained silent. It would have been okay if it ate the whole thing, but to leave half of it? Such a waste! You fucker! Perhaps something scared it off before it could finish, I offer. Maybe. Let's get the cam. My gaze follows his to the tree. It's gone. Without speaking, we sprint to the tree, each taking one side. Found it, I say, holding up the mangled piece of equipment. Looks like the card is intact. A miracle. Let's look at it back at your house. It was not a suggestion. We sit at the kitchen table in the assumed safety of my home, Glenn looking over my shoulder. Snaggletooth dozes at my feet, glad to no longer be alone. The camera had overlooked a food plot planted for the deer. Normally, the camera showed all sorts of wildlife paying the plot a visit. A clutch of turkeys, 6 raccoons, 2 damn many damn squirrels, and lots of deer, including the recently departed Majestic. The dates get closer and closer to Tuesday, or rather Wednesday morning. Around 2 a.m., we see the buck with the giant antlers near the camera. As we advance the pics, they move like an old hand-cranked movie. Majestic approaches but seems hesitant. He keeps looking back over his left shoulder. A few times he takes the crouching pose of a prey animal right before attempting to flee. In the gray-black background of the night vision image, the hulking outline of a pterotoid shape can be seen stalking Majestic. Next, the buck crouches down as if about to flee. Then he is being pushed toward the camera, body contorted as his rump disappears into a blurred snapshot of an unidentifiable predator. The dead stare, majestic, glaring 1,000 yards past the camera, concludes the macabre slideshow. We just stare at the haunting image. I scroll back through and look at the first pic in the series. It's big, whatever that blur is. And does that look like a juvenile? Glenn nods in agreement. You can stay the night with us, or you can go back to St. Louis. Likely it's just a brown bear and her cub. Nothing too scary. Look, chances are you're right, like always, but what if it's not? Lots of strange doings afoot. Told you about Thor, but did I tell you old lady McCain is missing? No, you didn't. What happened? We don't know much, just her car was found barely out of her driveway. Maddie Hess is spreading the rumor that she had offed herself after plowing through that biker a few months back. But you don't believe the old gossip, huh? He looks down as he shakes his head dismissively. Nope, I told you, Sarah and me saw the damn thing crash between my place and yours. And these things, they came from a crashed UFO on its way to mine iron. I mean, rare earth elements. Make fun of me all you want, big brother. He taps the 5-round magazine of my rifle as he passes it on the way out. You're gonna need a bigger mag. After he leaves, I go to the gun safe and grab the 3 30-round magazines I use for target practice. I empty the military surplus rounds used for plinking and replace them with bullets better suited for hunting. Sunday night. Fuck. The world has turned upside down. Glenn was right. Fuck. Aliens. About 5:30 p.m., Snaggle wanted to go outside. I followed him out, rifle slung over one shoulder. He sniffed around the fence before he started barking his head off. Then I heard it. A soft, skittering sound like claws on wood. I can't call it a face that appeared over the top of my fence. At first, it was just a round mouth, 2 to 3 times the size of what I assumed to be a neck. 6 hook-shaped claws, 3 to each side of the nightmarish mouth, gripped the top of the wooden fence. These it used to lift a slender serpentine body over the top. I could hear scratching on the other side of the fence at what I presumed were claws on its feet propelling it up and over. The top of the fence picket crumbled under its weight, causing it to lose its balance, topple to the ground, and roll toward Snaggle, who barked wildly. The creature let out a scared, ear-splitting cry. My dog nipped at the strange creature, which lashed out at him with its tongue, the proboscis wrapping around his remaining back leg. He yelped in pain. Instinctively, I unslung the rifle and shouldered it. Muscle memory kicked in as I sighted down the barrel, aiming for center mass. My thumb flipped the safety to fire. My fingers slid onto the trigger. Squeezed. Light recoil into the shoulder. The smell of smokeless gunpowder. Missing the small target, my bullet splintered a fence panel next to the alien. It let out a distressed howl, answered by a low rumble somewhere on the other side of my fence. But it didn't let go of my dog, and I was about to go full John Wick on its ass. I adjusted fire and aimed for the pink mouth. My vision tunneled, and I fired into the gaping maw. The Russian-made hollow point expanded as it contacted the soft tissue. The projectile didn't leave a massive exit wound. The creature slumped to the ground with a gentle groan. Blue-green blood oozed from the orifice, and shredded viscera floated out in clumps in various hues of pink, blue, and beige. The stench of ammonia hung heavy in the air. Its tongue loosened around Snaggle's leg, and he took off like a gunshot. He ran past me and into the house. As I beat a hasty retreat, its parent broke through my fence, giving me a better look at the snake-like species. It stood at maybe 7 feet tall and 2 spindly legs which matched its arms. Each limb ended in with 3 long hook-like claws. At the top of its body, it had a mouth as big as Snaggle and 2 eyes to either side that glared with hungry, murderous intent. The pink of the mouth contrasted with the dark gray skin on the front of its body. It looked at its dead spawn and then at me. With a bellowing clamor of rage and loss, it reared backward. In the woods, I could hear this call answered by other similar wails. I turned and ran, slamming the door behind me as I heard a tongue slam against the metal. I threw the deadbolt and pushed my wooden desk against it, hoping it would hold. Snaggle whined and I looked at his leg. The tongue must have been coated with something acidic. The fur was already gone, and a painful-looking chemical burn was dissolving the now exposed pink skin. I didn't have any milk, but I hoped some bismuth would work. Retrieving it from the medicine pantry, I poured the hot pink liquid on the injury, and it seemed to soothe as he looked up at me with grateful puppy dog eyes. That was 2 hours ago. As I hid, I called the sheriff. The dispatcher must have thought me crazy, drunk, or on meth. I heard hardly contained giggles in her voice. Eventually, I convinced her to send a deputy. When one became available, what I thought was just a mama bear and her cub proved to be a pack of these otherworldly creatures. They're casing the house, and I find myself unconvinced by their intelligence. They focus on the door the first adult saw me and Snaggle retreat into. They aren't breaking through windows or the back porch's French doors. Unexpectedly, light footfalls echo from the roof. That I'm as alien to them as they are to me is my only advantage. Unfamiliar with Earth dwellings, I wonder if they are actually predators that were destined for a galactic zoo or if they were bred for war. Either way, they have been unleashed on an unsuspecting world. I'm suddenly overcome by a memory. When I was in high school, we went to Fort Walton Beach for our senior trip. Our hotel overlooked the beach, and one night I broke curfew and just sat in the sand looking out into the blackness. Clouds muted the moon. A faint hint of horizon separated the deep black of the Gulf from the lighter black of the sky. I felt peaceful staring into that ominous void, and I thought that it was what purgatory must be like. I push such thoughts of the end out of my mind. I've prepared for this. I'm hunkered down in my walk-in closet. I made a fatal funnel when I got in a prone position and aimed at the front door. I'll have a chance. But if they find they can break in through multiple doors, they'll be able to attack as a horde, which would spell doom. The crawl space. Built as an expansion, the closet's foundation was poured with a small crawl space for ductwork that never got installed. I'll try to hide in there. I pull back the area rug covering the opening and lift the door. After you, buddy. I helped the medium-sized canine into his hidey hole. Unfortunately, they built it at a time when people tended to be smaller. I can only get him to safety. Be quiet, I tell him as I close the entryway and replace the area rug. I can hear the door as it starts to give way. It won't hold much longer. I look at the two 30-round magazines on the floor next to me. I reload the one I fired from earlier and snap it back in place. Plus the one in the chamber, I have 91 rounds total. They provide a false sense of comfort. Time is precious, and changing mags in an AK is slower than in an AR. My mind works the math on how far the creatures can advance in a handful of seconds. I'm not convinced the odds are in my favor. This leaves me with only one last task as the door starts to fail. Call Petra. I pick up the cordless landline phone just as it begins to ring. Fuck, Glenn, you always had shitty timing. I curse as I hit the green button. I don't give him time to respond. Listen, brother, they're here. There are more than two of them. A whole pack. Shelter in place. If you don't hear from me, Snaggle is in the crawl space under the walk-in and... As the door begins to give, the enraged swarm bangs harder. I have only seconds. Tell Petra I love her. I shoulder the rifle and take aim at the first pink mouth I see. Sunday night. Fuck. The world has turned upside down. Glenn was right. Fuck! Aliens! About 5:30 p.m., Snaggle wanted to go outside. I followed him out, rifle slung over one shoulder. He sniffed around the fence before he started barking his head off. Then I heard it. A soft, skittering sound like claws on wood. I can't call it a face that appeared over the top of my fence. At first, it was just a round mouth 2 to 3 times the size of what I assumed to be a neck. 6 hook-shaped claws, 3 to each side of the nightmarish mouth, gripped the top of the wooden fence. These it used to lift a slender serpentine body over the top. I could hear scratching on the other side of the fence at what I presumed were claws on its feet propelling it up and over. The top of the fence picket crumbled under its weight, causing it to lose its balance, topple to the ground, and roll toward Snaggle, who barked wildly. The creature let out a scared, ear-splitting cry. My dog nipped at the strange creature, which lashed out at him with its tongue, the proboscis wrapping around his remaining back leg. He yelped in pain. Instinctively, I unslung the rifle and shouldered it. Muscle memory kicked in as I sighted down the barrel, aiming for center mass. My thumb flipped the safety to fire. My fingers slid onto the trigger. Squeezed. Light recoil into the shoulder. The smell of smokeless gunpowder. Missing the small target, my bullet splintered a fence panel next to the alien. It let out a distressed howl, answered by a low rumble somewhere on the other side of my fence. But it didn't let go of my dog, and I was about to go full John Wick on its ass. I adjusted fire and aimed for the pink mouth. My vision tunneled, and I fired into the gaping maw. The Russian-made hollow point expanded as it contacted the soft tissue. The projectile didn't leave a massive exit wound. The creature slumped to the ground with a gentle groan. Blue-green blood oozed from the orifice, and shredded viscera floated out in clumps in various hues of pink, blue, and beige. The stench of ammonia hung heavy in the air. Its tongue loosened around Snaggle's leg, and he took off like a gunshot. He ran past me and into the house. As I beat a hasty retreat, its parent broke through my fence, giving me a better look at the snake-like species. It stood at maybe 7 feet tall and 2 spindly legs which matched its arms. Each limb ended in with 3 long hook-like claws. At the top of its body, it had a mouth as big as Snaggle and 2 eyes to either side that glared with hungry, murderous intent. The pink of the mouth contrasted with the dark gray skin on the front of its body. It looked at its dead spawn and then at me. With a bellowing clamor of rage and loss, it reared backward. In the woods, I could hear this call answered by other similar wails. I turned and ran, slamming the door behind me as I heard a tongue slam against the metal. I threw the deadbolt and pushed my wooden desk against it, hoping it would hold. Snaggle whined, and I looked at his leg. The tongue must have been coated with something acidic. The fur was already gone, and a painful-looking chemical burn was dissolving the now exposed pink skin. I didn't have any milk, but I hoped some bismuth would work. Retrieving it from the medicine pantry, I poured the hot pink liquid on the injury, and it seemed to soothe as he looked up at me with grateful puppy dog eyes. That was 2 hours ago. As I hid, I called the sheriff. The dispatcher must have thought me crazy, drunk, or on meth. I heard hardly contained giggles in her voice. Eventually, I convinced her to send a deputy. When one became available, what I thought was just a mama bear and her cub proved to be a pack of these otherworldly creatures. They're casing the house, and I find myself unconvinced by their intelligence. They focus on the door the first adult saw me and Snaggle retreat into. They aren't breaking through windows or the back porch's French doors. Unexpectedly, light footfalls echo from the roof. That I'm as alien to them as they are to me is my only advantage. Unfamiliar with Earth dwellings, I wonder if they are actually predators that were destined for a galactic zoo or if they were bred for war. Either way, they have been unleashed on an unsuspecting world. I'm suddenly overcome by a memory. When I was in high school, we went to Fort Walton Beach for our senior trip. Our hotel overlooked the beach, and one night I broke curfew and just sat in the sand looking out into the blackness. Clouds muted the moon. A faint hint of horizon separated the deep black of the Gulf from the lighter black of the sky. I felt peaceful staring into that ominous void, and I thought that it was what purgatory must be like. I push such thoughts of the end out of my mind. I've prepared for this. I'm hunkered down in my walk-in closet. I made a fatal funnel when I got in a prone position and aimed at the front door. I'll have a chance. But if they find they can break in through multiple doors, they'll be able to attack as a horde, which would spell doom. The crawl space. Built as an expansion, the closet's foundation was poured with a small crawl space for ductwork that never got installed. I'll try to hide in there. I pull back the area rug covering the opening and lift the door. After you, buddy. I helped the medium-sized canine into his hidey hole. Unfortunately, they built it at a time when people tended to be smaller. I can only get him to safety. Be quiet, I tell him as I close the entryway and replace the area rug. I can hear the door as it starts to give way. It won't hold much longer. I look at the two 30-round magazines on the floor next to me. I reload the one I fired from earlier and snap it back in place. Plus the one in the chamber, I have 91 rounds total. They provide a false sense of comfort. Time is precious, and changing mags in an AK is slower than in an AR. My mind works the math on how far the creatures can advance in a handful of seconds. I'm not convinced the odds are in my favor. This leaves me with only one last task as the door starts to fail. Call Petra. I pick up the cordless landline phone just as it begins to ring. Fuck, Glenn, you always had shitty timing. I curse as I hit the green button. I don't give him time to respond. Listen, brother, they're here. There are more than 2 of them. A whole pack. Shelter in place. If you don't hear from me, Snaggle is in the crawl space under the walk-in and... As the door begins to give, the enraged swarm bangs harder. I have only seconds. Tell Petra I love her. I shoulder the rifle and take aim at the first pink mouth I see. And now, P Ridge 2. Enraged, the creature was finally able to break through the barrier between her and the monster that stole the life of her son. It let out a victorious, high-pitched growl before one of her swarm mates pushed her through the hole into the monster's den. Thunder boomed and the den wall splintered next to her. Another thunderclap and a swarm mate's head exploded, splattering her with viscera and fueling her rage. Focused on her enemy's fear, she moved through her prey's shelter, which was much more spacious than the burrows and dens she was used to hunting in. She moved toward the thunderclaps with jerking movements so her prey could not hit her. The shock waves of its missiles tickled her skin as they passed by. Sounds of pain from her swarm propelled her toward the kill when a round grazed her neck below her maw. Another sliced into her above the leg. She collapsed, and a brother leapt over her toward the light and clatter of their target. She felt the claws of her swarm mates gently grip and lift her. As she was carried out of the den, she saw a mass of squirming serpentine bodies closing in on the monster that killed her son. A primitive sense of satisfaction flashed through her mind as she lost consciousness. Snaggle made himself as small as he could, trembling as he heard the clatter of battle above him. He never liked the noise his pack's alpha male made with his boomstick. The high-pitched calls and growls of the predators attacking them made him whine in pain. The unusual surroundings did not help either. It was dark and damp, filled with smells that he would have happily explored if it were any other time. There was a loud thud, and he heard the alpha male scream in pain. More loud claps from the boomstick were followed by silence punctuated by soft whimpers from the alpha. After a few moments, Snaggle scratched at the roof from which his alpha had been able to place him inside this strange space. His efforts were met with a low moan, but no rescue. He lay down, his eyes focused on the agonized sounds of his packmate. Snaggle lay on his paws as the worst moment of his life passed. Lacking a human sense of time, he could wait for as long as it took for one of his pack to rescue him. The floor above him creaked, and there was the sound of something vocalizing. Snaggle began to tremble when the roof started to shift. As the planks were removed, he backed into the shadows waiting to see who or what was coming for him. Just after midnight, Monday morning. Glenn sped through the woods toward his brother's house in his side-by-side UTV. The same paths they paved as children were now worn by time. Back then, they had been the hunters at the top of the food chain. He feared that the tables had turned, that they were now the hunted. All of his senses were tuned to his surroundings as he crashed through the wood. His lights cut through the darkness as limbs slapped against the side-by-side. He broke through the wood line and sped through a field. He saw the blue and red lights of police cars. Glenn leaned forward, trying to see if they were cops from the closest small town, Bourbon, County Mounties, or, the most problematic alternative, the Highway Patrol. As he drew close, he saw the blue markings of the Bourbon PD and breathed a sigh of relief. As he pulled up near the garage, he saw the silhouette of the police chief, Gene. Glenn was relieved, as they had been inseparable best friends growing up. "Hold up, Glenn," Gene said, towering over the UTV as Glenn pulled to a stop. "I'm going in, Gene. That's my big brother," Glenn replied, getting out of the UTV and reaching for his lever-action rifle. Chuck, the newest addition to Bourbon PD, stepped up close to his boss, seemingly looking for guidance on how to handle the situation. A subtle gesture from Gene made Chuck step back. "Well, we just got here. Thought it was you messing with us, pretending to be your brother, so we'd listen to a wild tale about aliens." Gene looked away from Glenn. "Didn't realize Rich was in town. The house looks like all hell broke loose." Gene grabbed his AR-15 out of his trunk, with Chuck following suit. "Yeah, whatever it was broke through his fence," Glenn briefed the cops. "Got on his roof and tore up the metal pretty good. We got some blurry pics on the camera." "So, you've seen them?" Chuck asked. Glenn shook his head. "Not clearly. Mind if we shut the hell up and go see if my brother's still alive?" he said, shouldering his rifle and marching toward the house, hoping the two cops fell in behind him. "Fuck me," he exclaimed, taking in the blue-green blood splatters and pink viscera clinging to walls and sliding toward the floor. "Now do you believe me about the aliens?" Gene couldn't meet Glenn's eye. "Yeah, they smell like cat piss." Glenn moved quickly into the house. "Gene, I see Rich." Glenn dropped his rifle and ran to a body on the floor. "Oh, God, Rich!" Tears came to his eyes. "Why the fuck didn't you come to our house?" His brother's body was covered in bites and burns. Rich had given the bastards one hell of a fight. When Glenn leaned over to sob, he felt Rich's chest move with a shallow breath, and noise came from his brother's throat. "Gene, holy fuck, he's alive. Call for an ambulance." "They're already on their way," Chuck said, taking point and covering the door with his rifle. "I think I can hear sirens now. Hopefully it's the EMTs and not the highway patrol. Don't want to answer why we let an armed civilian in here. This is the most foobar thing I've seen since Somalia." "Those look like chemical burns," Gene interjected. "Maybe those creatures' saliva or blood burned him? Chuck, go grab the first aid bag." Chuck was in motion the second the chief of police said his name, likely his Army combat lifesaver training kicking in. "We've got to get him out of his clothes," the police chief continued. "Go get a pitcher of water and any bottled water you can find. Cool, but not freezing." Glenn rushed to the kitchen, filled a pitcher, and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the fridge. Returning to Gene and his brother, the 2 men started tending to the wounded Rich. His clothes in tatters, they came off easily, and then they started rinsing him off. "Got the first aid bag," Chuck said as he returned. "I could see flashing lights. They'll be in here soon." "Thank God," Glenn said as he grabbed gauze from the first aid bag to bandage his brother. "Sheriff's Department?" A woman's voice boomed from the door. "Bourbon BD," Gene and Chuck yelled back. "House is clear," Chuck added. "Kayla, is that you?" he asked. "Yeah, I got here with the medics." She whistled. "It's clear. Bring in the stretcher," she yelled outside. "What have we got?" She approached the bedroom where Rich had made his stand. "What did this?" "Deputy Randolph," Gene said in acknowledgement. "Seems my crackpot best friend here isn't cracked after all. He thinks it's aliens." "I know it's aliens," Glenn corrected. "And I'll be damned if I don't believe him," Gene finished, shaking his head. The clatter of a stretcher interrupted their conversation as the EMTs entered. "We'll take it from here," one of them said as he started tending to Rich. "Who are you?" he asked Glenn, the only one not in uniform. "Glenn, he's my brother." Glenn nodded toward Rich. "Okay, Glenn, we're going to take good care of your brother. But right now, we need you to go outside and let us work," the EMT said firmly. "Come on, buddy," Gene said, guiding him out of the room. "So," Kayla began, "does this have anything to do with those National Guard trucks that rolled into Town and Country's parking lot yesterday morning? It's all over Facebook." "I don't know," Gene said. "I talked to the captain in charge. There's some sort of hazmat team, and all he said was an A-10 had crashed, and they were ordered to monitor for some chemical or other." "A-10 my ass," Glenn spat. It's a fucking UFO. I believe you, Gene responded, gesturing toward Chuck and Kayla, who were nodding in agreement. They believe you too. Something stinks, and it's not just the cat piss smell in Rich's house. Their phones all made the maddening clatter of the emergency alert system's alert tone. The same message, appearing in all caps. The governor of Missouri, in coordination with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has declared northeastern Crawford County and southwestern Franklin County a disaster area. A hazmat incident has occurred, and as precaution, all residents in and near Sullivan, Bourbon, and Cuba are instructed to evacuate. The National Guard, in cooperation with FEMA, is establishing shelters in the following counties or areas: Union and Washington in Franklin County, Steelville in Crawford County, St. James in Phelps County. It's going to be a long day, Chuck said. Yeah, Gene agreed as he read incoming text messages. They've shut down eastbound I-44 at St. James and westbound lanes in Stanton. The clacking of a stretcher drew their attention to the house. The EMTs were wheeling Rich out. He's in a coma, the paramedic from earlier told Glenn. It's not good. We're going to take him to the hospital in Sullivan. Came over the radio that they're evacuating all but the most serious patients. The National Guard is taking over as a trauma center. I'm sorry, but you can't go with your brother. Without waiting for a response, the EMTs hurried to the ambulance and started loading Rich. Glenn, Gene said before Glenn could say anything, I'm taking you home. Pack up Sarah and get the hell out of town. We don't know how many of these things are in the woods, and your side-by-side won't give you any protection in case of an attack. Not gonna get any argument from me, but first I need to see if Snaggletooth is all right. Rich called and told me where he hid his dog. I'd be better off with those things in my own family if I didn't at least look. After removing the floorboards, he peered into the darkness. Snaggle? Buddy, you down there? Glenn heard a whimper, and the trembling three-legged mutt crawled into the light. Glenn pulled him out of his hiding place. Yep, he's alive. It's not good, not gonna lie. He scratched behind the dog's ears and hugged him close for a moment before letting him down. Cautiously, Snaggle followed Glenn outside, where he lifted a phantom leg to relieve himself. The creature came to in a dense part of the woods that the swarm had found to regroup. She opened her eyes and saw her family. Her species used biofluorescence to see each other in the low light and darkness of their homeworld, but this new planet allowed more UV light. Her swarm shone in various hues of green, orange, and red. With effort she stood. Her wounds were already healing naturally, for which she was glad. Her kind practiced cannibalism. Normally it was after one died, but if hunger became too great, they would feed on the near dead. The swarm was silent, listening for the clicks of an approaching swarm mate. Silence favored predators, so they only used vocalization when in distress or needing to locate each other after becoming separated. They were more careful in this new place than when the strange colorless bipeds came to their home. They woke up in a strange place devoid of prey and emotion. The swarm fell into panic and rampaged through the space which brought them here. Which is why they were learning that in their new home, they should communicate through telepathy. Her mind was filled with a cacophony of images, some violent, some scared, all of them hungry. She projected the image of her son laying lifeless. The swarm understood the wisdom of the image. There was no future without the young. They would have to fight smarter and use the knowledge gained from their first battle at their crash site. Their prey brimmed with complex emotions and were most dangerous when these swung to the extremes of alertness and fear. However, when these creatures were at peace, they could be culled with relative ease. As the swarm settled upon a course of action, she could not stop projecting images of her son. The swarm knew she was intent on hunting for vengeance over sustenance. They would allow her to go, alone. They could not risk the collective for her quest. However, they wanted her to accompany the rest of the females to a cave nearby before she embarked on her singular mission. The police cruiser's tires crunched on Glenn's gravel driveway as they pulled up to the house. The door opened and a very concerned Sarah came rushing out of the house, wrapping her arms around her husband as he got out of the car. I called Petra. She's leaving St. Louis now, she said, not letting go. I-44's shut down and the hospital's now trauma center. No visitors. They're evacuating the area, Glenn told his wife. Why don't you call her back and let her know? There's nothing she can do stuck in traffic. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and stepped back. Yeah, but you know her. She's going to do whatever she wants. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and brought up her sister-in-law's contact. I'll meet you inside. Hurry. Glenn nodded and turned to Gene. Thank you, brother. The two men hugged. Stay safe. I will. Gene paused before getting back in his car. There's something I want you to have. He popped his trunk and took out a rifle case and small backpack. It's the AR we were talking about you buying. I know all you've got are your bolt and lever action rifles and your dad's .357. I know Sarah has her shotgun, but you could use something a little more tactical. Gene handed him the case and backpack. The backpack has some mags and ammo. Hopefully it's enough to get you where you're going. Thank you, Gene. Where do you think you're headed, St. Louis? Probably. Best bunk with family than sit around in a FEMA camp, Glenn said. Gene scanned the wood line for a moment. Think it's too much to hope this will be over soon and we can get back to normal? Glenn pondered it for a moment. That'd be nice, but I don't know how they can contain this. Gene stepped toward the open driver's door. Yeah, thought so. Go with God, Glenn. You too, Glenn said as his childhood best friend shut the car door and started rolling out of the driveway. Snaggletooth followed his alpha's brother, his tail by his one back leg and head down. Things were happening. Things he did not like. His alpha was not in their den when the alpha's brother pulled him from the scary space. Snaggle had sniffed and wandered around the house but could find no trace of his primary pack, so he followed his extended packmate. When he got out of the strange car, he sniffed the yard, recognizing the markings of his friend Thor. Thor was what the humans called him, but among the canines in the area, he was known as He Who Stands Against Thunderbooms. Snaggle, on the other hand, was known amongst their kind simply as Lucky, for surviving every trauma that would have killed a lesser dog. Personally, Snaggle believed no such creature as a lesser dog existed. Snaggle looked around the yard for Thor, but there was no sign of him. He stepped over to the nearest marking of Thor, lifted his phantom leg, and left his own calling card before following his alpha's brother into the den. The thumping of a wagging tail drew Snaggle deeper inside to where Thor lay in his bed. The other dog whimpered a greeting, which Snaggle returned. Both were too hurt and tired for the customary butt sniff, but did it anyway. After all, good manners distinguished canines from their human packmates. After the perfunctory whiff, the two curled up on Thor's bed and watched the humans go about their business. That's about it, Glenn said as he brought out the last of their emergency preparations and placed them in the bed of their truck. He placed their hunting rifles in the back seat. They had the AR and her shotgun slung over their shoulders. Sarah surveyed the woods looking for danger. Both were tense. We just need to get the dogs. Clatter in the woods interrupted their conversation. They shouldered their weapons and pointed at the noise. It's a soldier, Glenn yelled, lowering his rifle as a man in camouflage and tactical gear emerged from the woodline. He wore an expression of sheer terror. He's being chased, Sarah yelled as two of the serpentine creatures erupted out of the woods in pursuit. She fired at the creature to the soldier's left, her shotgun making it howl in its otherworldly high pitch. Glenn shouldered the AR from Gene and fired twice at the one on the right. His target howled and the two retreated back into the woods. The soldier bent over to gather himself and catch his breath before approaching them. Thanks, he said in between pants. I'm Captain Bolin with the Missouri National Guard. Glenn looked him over, counting 3 rifle magazines and a couple of pouches for a handgun that was not in the captain's hands nor holster. Also missing was the M4 or M16 rifle the other magazines were for. I'm Glenn. This is my wife, Sarah. Where are your men? They're gone, Captain Bolin explained. All of them. Those things surprised us. My NCOIC had just stepped outside our ops trailer to take a piss when they attacked. My team were downrange at the crash site checking our area ray sensors when one by one the teams started going offline. The soldier shuddered. The screams over the radio. His voice trailed. What were you doing out there again? Glenn asked, shooting his wife an I told you so look. We're replacing the area rays, the captain answered. What are area rays? Sarah asked. Gas sensors. There was a crash. They told us it was an A-10. We're with the civil support team. We do hazmat with first responders. There was a request to make sure things weren't off-gassing. Are you sure it was an A-10? Glenn asked. Not a UFO? The other man's eyes went wide before narrowing. Can I trouble you for a quick drink? Maybe the bathroom before we hit the road? Sure, Sarah said with a forced smile, stepping toward the house as the men fell in behind her. I'm going to need your rifle, Captain Boland said, eyeing Glenn's AR. With all due respect, that's going to be a no, Glenn said firmly. There's an emergency order in effect, and since I'm trained... Glenn held up a hand. My brother Rich and I were in the Army too. I'm trained. His eyes went to the officer's right sleeve, where a combat veteran usually wore the patch of the unit they deployed with. It was empty. The captain fell silent and followed Glenn into his home. The creature left the cave where the other females now busied themselves preparing the space for long-term habitation. It was a good space to build a nest. However, now was not the time to worry about mating, as the males were on the hunt to bring food back. Regardless, her mission was calling her. Her sisters understood, and she could feel their relief that their pups were skittering around their claws. She moved out of the cave, sniffing the wind to search for a particular scent of despair. It's good to have another soldier around, Sarah said when Captain Boland closed the door behind him. Glenn grunted but remained silent. But I don't care. It's nice to have someone in authority around as we evacuate, Sarah countered. The door to the bathroom opened and a refreshed Captain Boland emerged, exuding waspy confidence. Are we ready to go? He asked, now eager to get on the road. Yeah, just gotta load up the dogs, Glenn said as he grabbed his rifle. I also pulled this out of the truck for you. He handed the soldier his dad's .357 Magnum revolver. A cowboy gun? Captain Boland asked with an arched eyebrow. Glenn scoffed. Cowboy guns tend to be single action. That's double action, so you can just squeeze the bang button and needn't worry about the hammer. Plus, it's a Magnum, much bigger than the 9mm you lost. Glenn, be nice, Sarah chimed in. She turned to the dogs. Come on, boys. Who wants to go outside? Snaggle and Thor just looked at each other. If they don't want to go, Captain Boland said, leave them. We can't, Sarah said, her voice quivering. We won't, Glenn added. The captain opened his mouth to say something, but seemingly thought better of it. Come on, boys, Glenn said, nudging them towards the door. Hesitantly, they rose to their paws and followed behind, ears perked and heads on a swivel. After sniffing the air, they started to retreat back into the house. Glenn bent down and gave them comforting scritches. It's okay. We'll be with you. He resumed walking, the pair of pups skulking behind him. Sarah got to the truck first and slid into the driver's seat. Just as she started the vehicle, an attack came. The creatures came bounding out of the woods. There were 3 of them, one attacking straight on and the other 2 flanking Glenn and Captain Boland. Glenn had his AR shouldered instantly, aiming center mass on the one attacking from the left. Shit! He yelled as his round missed the undulating form of his target, which opened its maw to let out an annoying screech. Presented with a larger target, Glenn raised his aim and squeezed the trigger. The military surplus full metal jacket tore through the back of the alien's throat. It staggered and yowled in pain, retreating back into the woods as Glenn moved toward the truck. Hell yeah! Captain Boland yelled. He sighted down the barrel of the .357 at the attacker coming from the right, pulled the trigger, and missed. He fired again. This time, the jacketed hollow point shredded its brain, causing it to drop where it stood. We weren't doing shit against them. We should have been aiming for the mouths. The last attacker turned tail and ran. Glenn jumped into the back of the crew cab, keeping the door open so he could cover the captain and, if necessary, their escape from a second attack. Sarah was getting ready to tear out of the driveway when the captain climbed into the passenger seat. "We got the dogs?" Sarah asked. Glenn's face drained of all color. "I don't see them." "I saw them run into the woods," the captain responded. "But we need to get the fuck out of here." "Shit," Glenn spat. "Do we go after them?" Sarah asked. "The creatures are out there." Glenn's shoulders slumped. "The captain is right. They know this land. They know where to hide." "Yeah," Captain Boland's voice quivered. "They've probably gone aground, hiding somewhere. This is the cave state, right? They've probably found a small cave." Sarah looked at the two men and, with a trembling sigh, sped off. They had gotten about 5 minutes down the dirt road when Glenn's phone rang. The contact appeared on the Ram's infotainment screen. It was his Uncle Jerry, a trauma nurse at the hospital just up the road in Sullivan. Sarah hit the green button on the touchscreen. "Hey, Glenn." Jerry's voice was hushed and urgent. "They brought Rich in about 5 minutes ago." "How is he?" Glenn asked. "I'm not going to lie. He's not good. You need to get here fast." "Fuck." Glenn lowered his head. "Jean told me they had moved the civilians and that the hospital was for soldiers. We couldn't go there." "That was the plan up until 20 minutes ago. Then something changed. I don't know what." Jerry paused. "It's not without hope. You just need to take him with you wherever you're going." His exhausted voice echoed through the speakers. "I thought they were turning the hospital into a trauma center." Glenn looked at the captain, who was avoiding eye contact. "The government line. Imagine that," Glenn said through clenched teeth. There was banging coming over the phone. "I can't talk anymore. They're evacuating all the staff, making us go with them. We're taking those who can't be moved, but the more serious cases, we're leaving them behind. I tried, nephew. I really tried, but the last truck is pulling out in 5 minutes." More banging. "I gotta go." The sound of Uncle Jerry explaining to a soldier that he had gotten locked in a supply closet grabbing essential meds and had definitely not been making an unauthorized call was heard right before the line went silent. "Listen," Captain Boland said, "I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear your uncle breaking martial law. As long as we don't swing past the hospital and get to the nearest rally point ASAP, I need to find out about my men." "We're going to the hospital," Glenn said in a tone like forged steel. "We don't leave a man behind, remember?" "Your uncle's name is Jerry?" Captain Boland asked, his tone teasingly light. "I didn't catch a last name, but how many Jerrys could be working in a rural hospital?" "Guys, stop it!" Sarah yelled as she drove. "I'm with Glenn. We're going to save Richard, and you, Captain, are going to keep your mouth shut about Jerry." Glenn smirked, and the captain slumped back in his seat, sulking. "Good. I'm glad that's settled." Glenn rolled down his window and sniffed the air. "Anyone else smell that?" "Yeah," Sarah said, starting to speed up. What? Captain Boland said as panic started filling his voice. "I don't smell—" His voice trailed off as the unmistakable scent of ammonia filled the truck. As the vehicle rounded a turn, a single creature burst out of the trees on the passenger side of the truck. Sarah gunned it and took off, gravel and dust pelting the monster. The animal broke off its chase and disappeared back into the woods. "Fucking idiots!" Captain Boland cursed. "Those beasts are everywhere in this low-life redneck backwoods. We gotta get to fucking safety. If they've instituted martial law, I am in charge here. Pull over. I'm driving." "No," Sarah said, her voice as determined as her husband's. "I said pull over," the captain shouted, grabbing the wheel. The ensuing struggle for control caused the truck to fishtail and swerve off the road into a tree. Snaggle and Thor watched as the humans left them behind. When the attack happened, they had been separated from the pack. They ran to the side of the house and peered around the corner of Thor's den. They could see the new human. They made eye contact with him and waited for some sign that it was safe to come out from hiding. No signal ever came, and Thor's alphas sped off. The new human had smelled suspect, and neither had particularly cared for him. Thor's alphas would never abandon them. The two canines shared a look. No barks were needed. Honesty was one of the things humanity could learn from their kind, as they were unable to deceive. Unfortunately, some humans had mastered the behavior, and the duo now saw the captain as such a master. They sniffed the air and, recognizing the scent of the creatures, moved in the opposite direction. The creature moved through the woods, following the scent of her prey northeast. The fear she sensed coming from the metal-clad beasts they traveled in was too delicious to not at least try to feed. She would need the energy. Her prey had proven itself to be cunning and dangerous. The strange and dangerous bipeds that dominated this world were fewer now. The fewer of this species there were, the easier it was for her to track the one who had taken her child. She could sense he was close to death, and she had to hurry so she could be the one to dispatch him. Not that she would not consume him if he died before she could get to him, as it would still be fitting for him to be digested to help birth her next pup. Glenn and I were riding in his UTV, checking game cameras. Majestic ran beside us. Snaggle was curled up in the small bed, unusually calm. The little guy had always been fearless, except when it came to riding in vehicles. Just another sign of how perfect a day this was. The sun high in the sky provided just the right amount of heat to pleasantly warm the skin. Then it happened. Something hit us from the side, spilling Glenn and me into the air. As I flew, I saw Majestic torn in half. His head was flung toward me, and he stared at me with cloudy, dead eyes. I didn't know if he was warning me or damning me. I heard my brother cry out as he landed. Turning to the sound of his voice, I saw Bigfoot dragging him away. Next to the Sasquatch was a gray alien, anal probe in its hand. Glenn clawed at the dirt to get away. I tried standing up to run to my brother's rescue when another gray appeared right in front of me. With an inquisitive look on his face, he touched my forehead, and I passed out. I came to in blackness. Something is slithering in the shadows, hunting me, but always at the surface and never quite breaking through. I begin wondering if I'm going mad. Fear begins to grip me, and so does the sudden realization that I am about to die. Are these memories? Am I dead? I slap my face to wake myself up, to chase the thoughts away. I find myself home, standing safe and sound in my bedroom. Petra's there, titillatingly naked. I smile at her as she runs a finger up one deliciously curved hip. "If you want to ever have this again, Tiger, you need to fight," she says. "Fight?" I ask, confused. "Yes, fight." That's when I hear the distant beeping of hospital machinery as black smoke begins to swirl around me. My heart begins to race as I feel the need to fight against the nothingness. I'm stunned to find myself holding a samurai sword, its keen blade slicing through the smoke to no effect. "I'm sorry, Petra," I scream as the smoke envelops me, taking me back to the blackness. I begin wondering if I really am dead. The thought makes me chuckle because, of course, I'd end up in purgatory. I wouldn't say I'd been a bad man, but I did things for my country that left a stain on my soul. Not good enough for heaven, not bad enough for hell. I shrug and explore my surroundings. A flicker of light, not unlike a dying neon sign, beckons in the distance. I walk toward it, one foot in front of the other on an unknown surface. The lack of sound is as deafening as words. After a while, the blue xenon light begins to form words, a quote from my college years. "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." I sit down and stare up at the words. Albert Camus' idea about whether life is or isn't worth living being the only philosophical question worth answering has stuck with me. Every answer after this is gravy. Questions about science or religion don't matter once someone decides that life is no longer worth living, if it ever was. I hang my head and consider the burns on my arm. That pain had been comforting. It reminded me that I was still living, even though the pills the doctor pushed made me comfortably numb. For the first time in years, I began to weep. "Daddy?" The voice of a young child pierces the darkness. "It's not time for you to die." I bolt upright and run in the direction of the voice, away from the ugly light of nihilism. I see a brighter light as I hear the sound of hospital machinery growing louder. It too begins to form words. It's the best fan review I ever received. Richard's writing is like an insane new designer drug, one that lets you see into the granular nature of reality and what's written down the sides of it. Fuck off. Love God. I believe. I start to laugh, collapsing to my knees as the blackness begins to fade. To be concluded. Early Monday morning. The creature paused. Sensing her prey's agony, even from afar, brought her satisfaction. She had become the embodiment of obsession, and she would greet whatever fate awaited her with the wild passion of her kind's primitive demoniac spirits. The creature paused and took in the scents. She was being stalked by two of the smaller prey animals that were often in the company of the more dangerous two-legged kind. They were wounded, so she knew she could dispatch them if they became a problem. Nothing would stand between her and the creature that had stolen her child and dared to attack her. Snaggle's lone back leg ached as he and Thor made their way through the woods. His leg had grown strong to allow him to run, but it came at the price of occasional nagging aches. He also knew the strange jungle his alphas lived in had made him soft, and the fact that he had seen too many cycles of heat and cold didn't help either. But if his pack needed him, he could be as tough as he ever was. One more time. At first, he and Thor had moved away from the stinging scent of the terrifying predators, but it was dangerous to stay in one place. They could also smell that their human packmates were somewhere closer to the creature. Snaggle recognized the scent of the one that terrorized his pack, and he could smell her moving in the direction of his alpha. He looked at Thor and growled, "We gots to go toward the bad guy." Thor settled onto the ground on his belly, placing his paws over his eyes. Snaggle softly growled again. Thor reluctantly got to his paws and barked back, "You gotta be heckin' kidding me." The pair began moving in the creature's direction while keeping a respectful distance. Glenn felt like he had just lost a boxing match. He rubbed his forehead and felt a goose egg growing where it hurt worst. He squinted, trying to get his eyes to focus. His mind was reeling, trying to remember where he was and what he was doing before the crash. "Sarah!" he cried out, remembering the asshole officer and that she had been driving. "Sarah, baby, where are you?" "I'm right here, Glenn." He felt her soft touch on his shoulder, calming him. She was out of the vehicle and had the door open. She was looking him over. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay." She stood, planted her hands on her hips, and stared at him sternly. "Glenn." "Okay. Things are a little blurry. I got a headache. I'm feeling sick to my stomach." "I think you've got a concussion." "Ya think?" he snapped. "Sorry, just feeling a little grouchy." "I noticed." She went back to checking on him. "What do you think we'd do about the asshole?" "First things first," Sarah said. "We get you some help." "Where?" "Everywhere from Bourbon to Sullivan has been evacuated. I wouldn't be surprised if they carpet-bombed the place." Sarah lowered her head. "Well, I think the truck is fucked. The jerk steered us straight into a damn tree." "We're gonna have to walk. I think we're just down the road from the Gardner place. Might be able to pick up some wheels there." "Okay, but I'm driving." A dejected look clouded Glenn's face. "But if they have the Trans Am?" Yes, I know you love Tony's Trans Am. But even if it's still there, you need to relax." After helping him up off the ground, she hooked an arm around his and started walking. She paused to look at the unconscious soldier. "You were right about him." Glenn smiled in partial victory. "Don't let it go to your head." Sarah stifled a chuckle. "Before we go, grab the lever action and leave your shotgun for him. Glenn looked around where the captain lay slumped over in the passenger seat. He's not good enough for Dad's revolver, and a semi-auto will be easier for him. He may not know how to use a lever action. He tucked the .357 in his belt as Hannah laid the shotgun next to the captain, and they headed toward the Gardner farm. Well, he is a soldier. Doesn't that make him an expert on guns? Glenn chuckled. Nope. He emphasized the P sound with a pop. Soldiers just know what the army wants them to know. Daddy? It's a child's voice that sounds vaguely like my daughter's, but not quite. It's time to wake up. Slowly, I open my eyes. I'm in a hospital, and there's no one else around. Hello? I ask, my voice echoing in an empty ER. Nurse? Doc? Uncle Jerry? I wait, no reply. I sit up surprised I'm not connected to anything even though the heart monitor continues its regular beeping. I close my eyes and rub my neck. The scent of ammonia stings my nose and my eyes flash open. The creature stands before me. We stare at each other for a moment before she lunges at me, her hellish maw enveloping my vision. I sit up with a start, the heart monitor beeping erratically, and at once begin to gag on the air tube running down my throat. I rip off the mask and pull the surgical tubing out of my mouth, trying not to vomit as it triggers my gag reflex. Like a wounded, trapped animal, I look around. I know the bitch is around here somewhere. I just saw her. Or is that just the dream? Well, if I'm not dead, I at least hope the creature is. The beeping begins to slow as I huff air, my eyes continuing to survey my surroundings. This better not be another fucking dream, I say to the empty ward. The itch of the heart monitor's sensors and the burning in my lungs tell me it's not. They're the next to come off, and I'm surprised that there's not the sting of pulled hair. That's when I look down on my body. It's covered in hues ranging from raw pink to dark black. In some places, blisters have formed. My chest hair is mostly gone, stripped by their saliva. Images of the attack return, tongues lashing at me. The burning sensation from the whip-like appendages striking me. The ringing in my ears from the deafening sound of the rifle firing inside the house. I'm pretty sure that I killed or injured many of them, but I doubt I got them all. Though it would seem I did enough damage that they cut their losses and abandoned me as their prey. It's at this point I realize I'm naked. I slip out of bed and wrap the bedsheet around me. There's an eerie silence despite the humming of office and medical electronics. I pause, listening for anything out of the ordinary. I almost yell for someone, but think better of it. Besides, my eyes and nose still sting. At first, I think the burning sensation in my nose is from the air tube, but I start to wonder if it's from the ammonia. The first thing to do is find something to wear. Slowly, I creep down abandoned halls and rooms. It takes a few minutes, but I find some scrubs around the surgical suite. After some more exploring, I find a pair of shoes in a doctor's office. They're dress shoes and a little big, but they're better than nothing. My stomach rumbles. On the way to the cafeteria, I stop by the men's room. I pause as I pass a mirror and stare in disbelief at my face. The whites of my eyes are deep red. The same blisters on the rest of my body cover my face, along with a few lacerations from either claws or tongues. My hair is a mess. I find myself wondering how I'll look after this. The image of Frankenstein's creation, the 2000 play, not the green monster, floats to mind. I lower my head and burst into tears. I remember a man with burns I had seen as a child. I remember being terrified at that face without a nose, and now I am a spectacle to terrify young children. Captain Elijah Bullen slowly came to from his stupor. He tried standing but felt like he was about to pass out again. He took stock of himself. He ached all over because of that bitch and her asshole husband and the guy they were trying to save who was probably dead already. Fuck him and fuck you too, he spat. A rustle in the undergrowth made him reach for the revolver Glenn had lent him. It wasn't there. Motherfucker, he yelled, causing the squirrel that had come to investigate to flee up a tree. The captain shook his head and slowly started to get up, this time on less shaky feet. Looking around, he saw the shotgun they had left him. Fucking rednecks and their antiquated guns. chose not to remember how well the 357 had done compared to the M9s Sergeant First Class Kim Hoth had them using at the crash site. "I should have never left the quartermaster corps. At least there were no monsters in the shower and laundry repair shop," he muttered, looking around for any sign of which way his former companions went. His authority during martial law had been questioned, and he needed to reassert himself. Thinking he saw footprints, he began following them. Snaggle and Thor could smell their packs. Thor's humans were heading in one direction that was somewhat the way to Snaggle's Alpha, but incredibly inefficient. Not that efficiency mattered to their two-legged packmates who traveled around in loud, scary wagons. Some of their kind loved sticking their head out the window with the wind blowing through their fur, including Thor. But others like Snaggle, as brave as he was, hated the damn things and tended to vomit, much to the annoyance of the humans of his pack. The untrustworthy human was traveling toward a faint scent of the creatures that had invaded their territory. The two canines looked at each other. It was not in their nature to allow a human to come to harm. However, over the millennia that dogs had partnered with humans for survival, some like Snaggle had developed a sense for the character of people. He loved most, disliked few, and was suspicious of those he didn't know. Others, like Thor, tended to try and make friends with every creature, human or not, they came across. When Snaggle found out Thor had initially tried to make friends with his strange attacker, he considered scolding him. He held his tongue, however, hoping the gaping wound along Thor's back would be less than enough. Snaggle was about to make his case in a series of barks, growls, and whines, but Thor looked in the direction where the scent of Snaggle's human was most direct and started that way unprompted. The matter settled, Snaggle followed the other dog in his awkward but surprisingly fast three-legged pace. Captain Bolin froze as he again heard movement through the brush. He shouldered the semi-auto shotgun, hoping it wouldn't have too much kick, and prepared to defend himself. He aimed the gun in the general direction of the noise and considered taking a knee to steady himself. He decided against it since it would make it more difficult to run if he had to try and escape. "Captain?" A familiar voice came from the woods. "Is that you?" "Tech Sergeant Halfley?" The airman emerged from cover, his M4 shouldered and ready to aim and fire in a split second. "I never thought I'd be happy to see you, Captain." The other man looked around with an expectant look on his face. "Where's the rest of the team?" "After those agents came and requested you," the captain spat, still feeling salty that this pain in his ass was selected, despite his objections, by the two civilians running the operation. "We went about setting up a perimeter and monitoring with our area rays. Then we were attacked." The captain looked down and shook his head. Sergeant Miller was taken first as his area ray alerted for ammonia. He shouldn't have been out there by himself, but someone had to advance their career and head off with the incident commanders. The captain then looked up and stifled a grin. The sergeant was silent, his eyes squinting, no doubt holding back tears and hiding fear. Even the man's hand was flexing against the grip of his assault rifle. "Then Williams and Acevedo." Bolin took a deep breath and paused before continuing. "There had been some sort of warning by the time the creatures got to Bell and Tennyson. Sergeant Hoth and I heard them put up one hell of a fight." "Where's Sergeant Hoth?" Sergeant Halfley asked. "She didn't make it." Captain Bolin actually shed a tear. They had joined the Army National Guard around the same time as shower and laundry repair specialists. He had joined the civil support team first, figuring CBRN would make for a better career. He had been right. He talked a good game and maxed out the physical fitness test a few times, so they made him an officer. He brought Sergeant Hoth on board when she was looking for a job. And now his friend was dead. "And yet you're still here," the airman said, his eyes looking over his captain. "Got all your ammo, I see, but not your weapons." Captain Bolin bristled. "I see you still have all yours, so you haven't fired a shot either." Sergeant Halfley just laughed. "I was empty until about an hour ago. Came upon an abandoned house. They must have evacuated so fast they forgot to lock the door behind them." He took a plastic magazine out of his rifleman's vest. "It's Magpul, so civilian. The people who lived there had more AR-15 mags and ammo than I could carry." With the hand not on the pistol grip, he slapped one of the bulging cargo pockets of his uniform pants. The captain shrugged. We should probably move out. It's getting dark and we need to find a checkpoint or something. Agreed, Sergeant Halfley said, walking in the direction the captain had just come from. Sergeant, we're going this way, Captain Boland said, nodding the way he had been heading. Not unless you want to make it easy for the aliens. Can't you smell the faint scent of ammonia? There's a group on the hunt to the southwest. We're currently downwind from them. How do you know they're aliens? The agents told me. Something about how the A-10 we were sent out to monitor crashed because it collided with a disabled UFO. They were carrying these beasts from a dying world to a planetary preserve in their solar system. There's some sort of predator that preys upon the weak, culling other species of those who are ill. They can sense not only disease, but things like pain, depression, and fear. Boland scoffed. Yeah, right. How the hell would they know that? Sergeant Halfley shrugged. They said they were part of a highly secretive part of the intelligence community that deals with interplanetary threats. They couldn't tell me much now, but after this, I have an opportunity to leave the CST and join them. This stopped Captain Boland in his tracks. Why the fuck would they want you? I thought you'd be happy I was leaving, Captain. The sergeant spun on his officer. As for why they want me, that's above your pay grade. He began walking away. It took the captain a few moments to find his tongue and catch up. I could order you to tell me. Sergeant Halfley grinned, his expression smug. You could, but it'd be illegal, and I wouldn't. He went silent. Sergeant, the captain was silenced by Halfley's hand on his mouth. He was about to tear into the man when the wind picked up, carrying with it the strong scent of ammonia. The sergeant removed his hand, and the captain shot him a look communicating that this was not over, not by a long shot. Sergeant Halfley shouldered his M4 and flicked the selector switch to semi. Captain Boland watched as the other man tracked something with the barrel of his weapon. The captain looked into the woods, seeing nothing, but decided to shoulder his shotgun anyway. He turned his back to Sergeant Halfley and covered the left flank with his shotgun. This got an approving nod from the sergeant, who kept his head on a swivel between what was in front of them and to their right. The captain heard rustling to his right and instinctively twisted to look for himself. The loud crashing of a large animal through the woods brought his attention back to what he should have been covering. One of the creatures sped toward him, its horrible maw open wide and claws raised to attack. Reflexively, Captain Boland, more pointed than aimed the shotgun at the mouth of the alien and pulled the trigger. The buckshot load the rednecks had left him eviscerated the creature, blasting a hole almost big enough for him to stick his fist through. He let out a laugh and turned toward his comrade. Holy fuck, did you see? He was cut off as Sergeant Halfley's M4 roared, tearing a smaller hole through the one attacking from the right flank. Movement caught his eye, and the third creature, this one screaming its high-pitched yell, made a desperate charge toward them. Both men reacted at the same time, firing almost simultaneously at its open mouth, leaving behind a stump. They watched its headless body slump to the ground. The creature could smell the delicious scent of fear wafting off one of a pair of the bipeds nearby. She was hungry and needed to feed, but she could smell the strength of its companion. The fact that a trio of her male swarm mates was closing in on them also gave her pause. It would be a quick kill with 3 of them and easier with 4. However, she was not sure if these enemies had strong defenses or if they were the more docile kind her swarm had fed on when they first arrived. Hearing the loud thunder their weapons made settled the issue for her. She felt each one of the males die. However, they would not go to waste. A swarm of about 10 were hunting close by and would feed before deciding whether or not to seek retribution for the deaths of their swarm mates. As for her, if she was going to die by human hands, it would be in battle with the monster who stole the life of her son. She began moving but paused, momentarily forgetting about her prey, as she sensed a familiar presence, one she had last encountered on her homeworld right before she awakened on this planet. There was so much about this presence that confused her. It hunted her kind, but not for food. It captured instead of killed, something she couldn't understand. She would have to be quick. She would have her revenge before she was taken again. I'm starting to feel better. Glenn broke the silence as he got closer to Tony's house. He loved Trans Ams and even had one as a teen in the 90s, although his parents did make him sell it after a high-speed chase from tiny Leesburg all the way through Bourbon. Honest. He really wanted to drive the classic their friend kept in his barn. Sarah was about to respond when she stopped and put a finger to her lips. She made a show of sniffing the air. Glenn followed suit but couldn't smell anything. A breeze then began to stir, and it carried a subtle hint of ammonia. The couple began moving slowly and quietly toward Tony's yard, hiding behind an overgrown bush at the end of his driveway. Tony was infamous among his friends for not liking to do yard work. It annoyed his wife, Miranda, but it made for good theater when they all hung out. Right now, Glenn couldn't have been more grateful. They didn't see anything and were about to move when they spotted one of the creatures around the garage. Glenn could still feel the effects of his concussion. Driving 10 minutes to a hospital was one thing. Making a precise long-range shot with Sarah's life in the balance was another, so Glenn planned to suggest he distract the beast while Sarah shot it. She had grown up hunting and was almost as good with a rifle as he was. It was a mix of machismo and self-awareness that made him want to put himself in danger. The thought of using his wife as bait was something he just could not entertain. The roar of a shotgun in the distance made the couple and creature freeze. Next, they heard the sound of rifle shots, ending with the crescendo of a shotgun and rifle being fired almost simultaneously. Then, a silence that was interrupted by an alien cry in the distance. The creature reacted and took off into the woods. Sarah and Glenn looked at each and shrugged. Not seeing any others and with the scent of ammonia weakening, they moved out of cover. "I was gonna distract it and let you shoot it," Glenn said proudly. She chuckled. "So, you admit I'm a better shot?" "Only when I have a concussion." He winked and smirked. "My hero," she said, snaking an arm through his and drawing him close to her. "You're still not driving the Trans Am." Glenn groaned and kicked a rock in disappointment. "Sun's about to go down." He was cut off by the hairs standing up on the back of his neck. He turned and looked into the sky behind him. "No," was all he said as he saw a black triangle silently growing larger as it approached in the darkening sky. "We need to find someplace to hole up for the night," Sergeant Hafley said as the shadow of twilight glided through the trees. "Afraid of the dark?" Captain Boland sneered. "Not at all. I like to get to my deer stand about an hour before first light. But then again, that's when I'm not being hunted by creatures who can sense things like fear." The captain scoffed. "Sure, keep telling yourself that." The sergeant had been right earlier. Captain Boland did look forward to the day the airman was no longer his problem. The captain thought of himself as a good judge of character, and despite the last engagement, the guy was not who he wanted having his back in combat. Sergeant Hafley stopped. "Buck," he said quietly. "Buck," he said quietly. "They're here." "Why aren't you whispering? Why aren't you whispering?" the captain admonished in a hushed tone. "It's a different them." Sergeant Hafley shuddered, showing visible fear right before the woods exploded. They had wandered into an ambush. Sergeant Hafley dropped to a knee and began firing at open mouths. "Engage, Captain, engage!" he yelled in between bursts of semi-automatic fire. There were too many for them to fight. The captain screamed and turned on his heel. One creature dropped from a tree, eliciting another scream from the captain in a higher pitch than the last. Since it blocked his escape, he had no choice but to shoulder the shotgun and fire. This time he shot low, blowing off the lower left of the creature's jaw. While not a kill shot, it did fall to the ground to writhe in obvious agony. A path open, Captain Boland leapt over the squirming beast and took off in a run. "Come back here, you fucking coward!" Sergeant Hafley screamed loud enough to shake the earth. He shot another creature right before a tongue whipped around his boot and dropped him to the ground. Another creature swooped in and took a chunk out of the sergeant's shoulder. "Damn you!" he yelled as the beasts began to swarm, his tone suddenly more fearful and defeated than enraged. Captain Boland heard his non-commissioned officer curse him. It was too late to do anything. It had been foolish on Hafley's part to have even tried to fight that many attackers. But he couldn't resist the pull to look back, and the face the other man was making would haunt the captain for the rest of his life. It was desperate and angry. The captain registered the muzzle flash the same moment he felt the small bullet graze his right shoulder. He reflexively dropped his shotgun, turned, and ran. Technical Sergeant Halfley watched as the most despised member of his unit cut and ran, revealing himself as the coward everyone knew him to be. The creatures were swarming him, and he knew he was about to follow in the footsteps of every other member of his team. As teeth sunk into his flesh and tongues slashed at his uniform and skin, he chose to aim at the man responsible for the death of his comrades. But he couldn't pull the trigger and shoot a man in the back, even one as despicable as Captain Elijah Bolin. Then the coward turned, causing Halfley to grin so wide it was painful. As he squeezed the trigger, a creature bit his left arm, causing his shot to go wide and only wound his target. He was seconds from death, but his last feeling was vindication as one of the creatures stopped attacking him and pursued the captain. And the last thing Technical Sergeant Halfley saw was a triangle-shaped spacecraft silently moving through the early evening sky. The captain ran, not caring he had just been shot. Part of him was pissed he wouldn't be able to bring the man up on charges of fratricide. The sound of one of the creatures chasing him pushed all thoughts not related to fleeing out of his mind. He turned to look over his shoulder and saw his pursuer. He let out a pathetic yelp as his foot caught on an exposed root, causing him to crash to the ground. Instinctively, he rolled as the creature pounced and landed where he would have been. He tried to get back up, but a tongue whipped out of the alien's mouth and wrapped around his ankle, pulling him to the ground. The creature retracted its tongue and began behaving differently, moving slowly. Captain Bolin's fear began to rise to levels of panic he had never experienced. His tormentor would lash at him with his tongue, causing him to yelp and flinch. The captain began wondering if it were playing with him. If they truly preyed upon emotion and pain, this could be it preparing its meal the same way he marinated his steaks. Slowly, the creature stalked toward him. As his death drew near, Captain Elijah Bolin began to sob as he pissed his pants. He closed his eyes and looked away as the heavy scent of ammonia seared his airways. A bright blue light suddenly blinded him even through his tightly closed eyelids, and he heard a loud thud. He felt something heavy fall across his leg and heard the soft movement of feet. Not the clawed feet of these creatures and not the paws of a dog or the hooves of a deer, but something that sounded a lot like footsteps. He opened his eyes and the woods were cast in a light blue glow. The creatures were on the ground as if they had suddenly fallen asleep where they stood. In the distance, 2 children, as unbelievable as that was, crouched in front of the lifeless body of Tech Sergeant Halfley. "Hey, get out of here!" he yelled as he tried to get up but couldn't. His pursuer had fallen across his left leg, effectively pinning him to the ground. In lieu of struggling, he just watched. The creatures began rising into the air. The captain's jaw dropped as he watched them float away toward a triangular craft hovering 100 feet above him. The sound of a twig snapping brought him back to Earth to find himself staring into the black voids of a gray alien. Realization hit. Those hadn't been children. "You are real," he whispered as he stared into the deep eyes, too mesmerized to flee. He instantly felt foolish for all the times he had mocked those in his social circles who believed in the stories about these visitors from another world. His fear began to ebb. Something about the little alien was calming him, even the pain from the bullet wounds lessening. As the alien extended a finger toward his forehead, Captain Bolin welcomed the touch. He was convinced it would provide healing. He did not know from what, only that he needed it. The alien paused, looking over its shoulder as if in silent communication with its fellows. This was confirmed when it nodded, retracted its touch, stood, and rejoined the others. Then they floated into the air, disappearing into the craft that silently began moving northeast, leaving Captain Elijah Bolin alone with the body of the last man entrusted to his command. Snaggle and Thor approached the hospital. They had become aware that they were being followed. The stinging scent would get close and then fall back. They planned to find a way inside the large, strange den and reunite with Snaggle's Alpha to either flee or meet the predator as a team. They approached a door like the ones their dens had leading into the backyard. They could see through it, but light flared off of it, letting them know something barred them from just walking through the opening. They shared a concerned look because no humans were around to open the door. Snaggle decided he would try scratching at the door. It worked at home, so perhaps it would work at this strange place. He stepped forward, and the doors magically opened. He let out a pleased bark as Thor ran past him. The creature watched the two small animals approach the strange structure that housed the evil that killed her pup. She could smell his agony. It was a mix of the physical pain of teetering on the verge of death and a lack of will to live. This gave her pause. Death would end its suffering. Normally, this was something her kind took pride in. Their primitive sentience reconciled killing as a mercy on the diseased and suffering. But now she hunted out a sense of revenge, so how could she grant this monster a mercy it did not deserve? She had wasted precious energy getting here only to realize the all-consuming lust for vengeance would be best sated by letting the miserable creature live. She was about to turn and slink into the woods in search of different quarry when she sensed a sharp new emotion from her prey. Joy. With renewed rage lit deep inside her, she turned back to the hospital, hot with bloodlust. The same distorted vision stares back at me from the stainless steel of a cafeteria napkin holder. For the umpteenth time, I laugh maniacally at the joke that will be my next author photo. I sigh and think about searching for a cell phone to call Petra and Glenn, as they're probably worried sick about me. I try the landlines, but they aren't working. The same goes for the computers. I turn on a TV and find out a hazmat incident had occurred in the area and everyone has been evacuated. If the government is concealing the outbreak of some invasive species that preyed upon humans, it makes sense they would cut communications. I begin wondering if I would have cell service even if I did find a phone. I can check the parking lot for a car and maybe head back towards St. Louis, perhaps find medical help along the way. Probably don't want to walk in on Petra with ill-fitting clothes and a monster face. My pity party is interrupted by the clickety-clack of claws on the tile floor. No fucking way, I mutter. It has to be a stray that wandered in. But what if... Snaggle? I call, trying and failing to mask the hope in my voice. The clickety-clack stops, as does my heart, as I wonder if I've just alerted some different breed of alien demon to come finish me off. Snaggle's unmistakable bark echoes down the hall. Snaggle! I scream with joy, and I hear his distinct three-legged run heading toward my voice. That's when I notice he isn't alone. Thor! Another deeper bark. I'm here, boys. I'm here. I feel tears start to run down my face. I slide out of my chair to the ground as the pair find their way to me, sniffing and licking my face happily. I wrap my arms around them and bury my face in theirs, feeling the primal joy of no longer being alone, of being part of a tribe in this world, of knowing that people, these mutts included, love me. I stand. You boys must be hungry. I head toward the serving area with them following happily behind me. The cooks must have been in the middle of a lunch or dinner rush because there are plenty of grilled chicken breasts and hamburgers sitting near the grill. I had had half a chicken breast and that was enough for me, but these two look ravenous. I toss a hamburger to Thor, who eagerly wolfs it down. I toss another to Snaggle, who usually wants treats like this chopped up for him, but he also quickly scarfs it down. They look up at me, their puppy dog eyes begging for more. Who am I to refuse? I toss them each a chicken breast, laughing at how happy it makes them. I return to the dining area with a fruit cup and relax into a seat, the sight of the dogs elevating me out of the all-too-familiar depths of despair. I lean back and close my eyes. Tap, tap, tappity, tap. My eyes open wide as the dogs begin to growl. They're already on their feet with their hackles raised, teeth bared, lips curled into menacing sneers. Fuck. The chicken and beef Snaggle's human had given them hit the spot, and they followed him from the food place to the resting space. Snaggle was exhausted from their trek, and he could tell Thor, despite having 4 legs, was tired too. They were ready to curl up and maybe catch a snooze. The tile floor was refreshingly cool. But the unmistakable scent stung Snaggle's nostrils shortly before they heard the faint sound of the creature's claws on the floor. Between the joy of reunion with his alpha and the delicious meat, he had forgotten about the threat that had stalked them. Thor had beat him to his paws, and his raised fur and growl matched Snaggle's. Both canines were tired of these creatures invading their territory and attacking their humans. It was time to kill or be killed. Their enemy appeared, and Snaggle's human was on his feet, barking in the peculiar way humans do. They knew he was trying to get them to run, but the time for retreating was over. Thor lunged at the creature, letting out a yelp as it caught him, and it bit into his neck before tossing him over its shoulder into the hall from whence it came. Snaggle saw his packmate laying lifeless in the hall and sank his teeth into the creature's leg as hard as he could, causing it to cry out in pain. Its cry hurt Snaggle's sensitive ears almost as much as the creature's blood stung his nostrils and burned his tongue. The latter forced him to reflexively release the creature, shaking his head in a vain attempt to get rid of the pain. The creature's stinging tongue whipped Snaggle before it jumped at him and tossed him into the hall. His furry body banged off the wall, and he found himself lying next to Thor. He tried to stand, but something was broken, and he whimpered in pain. He looked at his packmate, and they shared a sorrowful stare. Thor closed his eyes and let out a soft whimper. Snaggle looked toward their enemy and saw it chasing after his human. They disappeared behind a set of doors. He tried to get up, but his ribs erupted in pain. He too closed his eyes, knowing the end was near and accepting it. They were good dogs, but they had failed. Having easily dispatched the nuisance animals, she focused her attention on her prey. She felt joy that she had stripped away the momentary happiness it had felt. Now it would pay. She stalked after it, knowing exertion would tire it out and make it easier to kill. Her kind rarely took their time with prey, yet when it came to revenge, tormenting with needless violence gave the meat a delicious quality, and she would savor it as much as she would the kill. I know it sounds crazy, but this creature, I killed its baby. There's a familiarity in the way it looks at me, a familiarity filled with hate. The insane thing is, I don't blame it. I would feel the same way were the roles reversed. If there were a living embodiment of cancer, I would be as savage as this beast. The creature and I stare at each other from across the room, its eyes on fixed stalks on either side of its horrific tooth-filled mouth. At first, I can't see its pupils, lost in a purple marbled iris, but then its pupils dilate from black pinpricks to a wide vertical stripe down the center of each eye. It chills me to the bone. My fight or flight impulse kicks in, and fight loses as I turn to run to the kitchen. I call the dogs to follow me. While exploring the kitchen, I had found a janitor's closet that seemed perfect for hiding. I assume smell is the primary means by which the aliens track their prey. The closet smelled of chemicals, which I imagined would hide our odors. But the damn dogs, they attack it. We are no match for it, all still recovering from earlier run-ins with the creature and its swarm. I'm convinced at this point that Thor met one of these things instead of a bear. I try calling them again, but they are single-mindedly heading toward the creature. Tears start to slide down my cheeks. Snaggle, come on, boy. I hear Thor's yelp as the creature grips him and then tosses him as if he were a rag doll. No, come back, Snaggle, come back, I scream as he bites the creature. God damn it, Snaggle! I freeze, watching the horror unfold before me, and I don't know what to do. Fuck you! I cry at the creature, my throat raw. Only moments ago I was feeling some degree of sympathy for her, but now I only feel impotent rage and grief. I have no choice but to try and escape so Snaggle and Thor didn't die for nothing. I make it to the refuge of the closet. The heavy wooden door has a lock, and I flip it in the hope it will help. I can hear it stalking me. It's outside the door. Fuck! I cry out as the creature begins banging on the door. Its high-pitched roar strikes terror in my heart. I can see the hinges move each time the creature makes impact. It's unbelievably strong, and it's only a matter of time before it's going to break through. I'll have no choice but bite. Again. I grab a mop as the door splinters and strike at the creature. It swipes at me with its claws, its tongue flicking out at me, again lashing my flesh and burning it with its saliva. I grab a bottle of bright green cleanser and start spraying at it maniacally. Miraculously, the creature staggers, but with its body blocking the door, I can't run. It recovers quickly and reaches for me. I feel its claws digging into my sides, and I wonder if it's taking its time with me, if it's enjoying my agony. I reach for anything that can help me. I start desperately pummeling it with a bottle of bleach. The creature starts snapping at it, its teeth eventually sinking into the plastic bottle. The bleach flows out of it and down its gullet. It releases its grip and I fall to the floor. The alien is thrashing and I swear I can see a yellowish gas coming from its mouth. It smells like a swimming pool. Though the creature steps back and topples to the tile floor, I'm scared to trust that I've actually killed it. The chloramine gas reaches me, causing my nose and throat to burn. I can't stay here. Soon the oxygen will be displaced and my lungs poisoned. I stagger through the faint toxic cloud. My lungs continue to burn as I make my way back to the dining area and collapse on the floor. I look into the hall to find it's flooded with light. I wonder where the two children crouching in front of Snaggle and Thor came from. A sound behind me makes me turn my head, and I'm staring into the two deep black eyes of a gray alien just like the one from my dream. Holy shit. I'm either hallucinating or Glenn was right. Twice. The alien cocks its head as it studies me. It places a finger on my head, and I feel at peace as I lose consciousness. Light flooded through Snaggle's eyelids and he lazily blinked them open. He saw a trio of humans approaching. They were small, like children, but they looked and smelled odd. He watched as they finished examining him and Thor. Each breath got easier, and he felt less pain from his broken ribs. Snaggle watched as Thor's side began to rise and fall. His tail started to slowly twitch with life. He felt happy confusion when the black lab opened his eyes. A commotion from the dining area drew Snaggle's attention. As he turned, he saw his humans stumbling and then falling over. One of the small humans was tending to him. After a while, the small humans gathered and disappeared into the kitchen. Snaggle looked at Thor and together they tried to stand. Their legs were unsteady, but they limped toward Snaggle's human. They settled down next to the man and rested their heads on his chest as he breathed shallowly. Movement and a stinging scent drew their attention to the kitchen doors. The creature appeared, its lifeless body floating as the small humans walked beside it. Snaggle couldn't help but growl. One of the small humans turned its deep black eyes toward Snaggle, and he calmed. The sound of familiar voices drew Snaggle from a nap he didn't remember deciding to take. Thor was already awake. His ears were raised and he barked. His tail was wagging, letting Snaggle know he hadn't dreamed the sound of Thor's alphas. Both dogs stood, some of their strength back, and stepped into the hall to guide the latecomers to the injured human. 10 months later. The sun warms my skin. The scars are not as bad as I worried they would be. After much physical therapy, I was able to begin living a somewhat normal life. I do get odd looks from time to time, but at least the neighborhood children are not running from me. I reach down and give Snaggle a scratch behind his ears. Thor perks up and looks for Glenn. Both made miraculous recoveries, but they still bear their scars like me. And like me, they are slower than they once were. The government offered Glenn and me way too much for our homes and our silence. We went in together on some land outside Onondaga Cave State Park outside of Leesburg. It was the fresh start Petra and I needed. Petra. The sight of her brings a smile to my lips. I watch her waddle after Sarah, who's showing her the landscaping plan for the new house she and Glenn had just built. She's 6 months pregnant, a living embodiment of my progress in finding balance between the beauty and darkness of life, and miserable in the summer heat. Glenn joins me on the porch, handing me a maker's mark on the rocks before taking his seat and giving Thor ear scratches. Just saw on the news Major Bolin is getting a medal, the Army Cross. I nod and hold up my glass and toast. Not all heroes wear capes. And not all who wear uniforms are heroes, Glenn responds. I feel sorry for him in a way. I saw him on the news giving an interview. He looks so hollow. The survivor's guilt is eating away at him big time. He knows who he is now. Glenn scoffed, turned, and spit. Yeah, I saw same thing, but he's a piece of shit. When he showed up, all his ammo pouches had full mags. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the reason all his team is dead. I silently weigh his words. I didn't get to meet the guy, but Gene filled us in on the rumor that the captain had been found relatively unharmed next to the body of one of his men. I think about his empty stare, mechanical voice during interviews. It reminded me of how I looked and sounded after my daughter lost her battle with cancer. I shiver thinking about that version of me, how life had become a burden, and I look forward to its end. My gaze falls upon my pregnant wife, and I think about the son who will be born soon. I smile. Life is good. Cathedral Cave, Leesburg, Missouri. The pup had been stirring for a few days. The soft shell of its egg was growing too tight, and it was hungry. It had sensed other members of the swarm, all about his age, none older. Some had burst forth and were helping others escape the confines of their shells. With some help from a recently hatched female, the baby creature emerged into the only world he would ever know. Ready
Chilling tales for dark nights.